In the episode of Rules for Retrogrades that you're about to watch or listen to, which is now completed, we're about to release it. It's interesting because it's on dating, which we've covered some as stalwart, well-known opponents of feminism, male and female. And my brother is co-author on my forthcoming No Christian Feminism book. Steph has her own book, Ask Your Husband, aptly named. I feel like it probably falls to me, Timothy Gordon, yours truly, to give these tips about dating, not just because I'm a stalwart opponent of feminism, but because personally, autobiographically, I have a lot of experience dating, even though by today's standards, Steph and I got married relatively young. We were in the same friend group for many years, and she met many of the girls I dated. I dated extensively. I dated extensively in a mostly old-fashioned context, a kind of new old-fashioned context where I would go on dates. And from really my sophomore year of college to my senior year of college, I fit in more straight-up dating than I think anyone I've ever talked to. As soon as my band broke up in early college, I stuck to the books and to dating. I really made a science out of trying to get the best mate. And all the while, I was falling in love with my friend Stephanie here,
who I was dating his best friend at the time. So, we were kind of like, our friendship kind of grew into, us dating, and during this time, I'm kind of, Tim's friend, and I'm watching like all of this.
It grew like a flower in the ghetto concrete.
Of Plano, Texas.
Well, Richardson, because at the time I was at University of Texas. Yeah, we did, and you were there in Plano.
Yeah.
But anyway,
sounds as lovely as it is.
The long and the short of it is, we're qualified to give this advice. These are a posteriori bits of advice, meaning from experience. What you're hearing in a lot of the traditional circles is bad advice. It's LARPy, and so we offer this kind of medicinal take on do it in an old-fashioned way, do it in the Christian moral way, but in 2020, in the context of 2021 soon, it simply does not do to pretend we're in, 1121. And even then, those estimations of what dating might have been like in the 1100s are usually fabrications of the imagination and never existed anyway.
Yeah, and also it's, we're gearing this episode is to increase the intimacy in a chaste and holy way in the young couple that are dating. And also we have experience with that, and we've been married for 15 years now, so we're trying to combine what we know and what we've learned along the way. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, you're giving a lot of advice. Like, a lot of these things are just the things that we learned, like on our journey, so to speak.
Pitfalls.
SJW on our journey. Exactly. So, yeah.
Intimacy is the watchword. Steph keeps saying it along the way of the video, and it's exactly right. Dating from the first date through the courtship to the period of being engaged, through marriage to the day of the first one of your deaths, is all about increasing intimacy with respective proportion to where you're at in the relationship. But you always want as much intimacy as is appropriate to whatever stage of the relationship you're in, which begins on date one. That will be the thoroughgoing blue thread in this video. And with no further ado, you'll see a full introduction because we introduced this baby, but we give you dating with Ask Your Husband.
I'm Michael Knowles, here to tell you that Rules for Retrogrades, the book and the show, are out now, and you absolutely need to check it out before the thought police confiscate all of it and lock you away.
Rules for Retrogrades out today. Counter disruption. We're disrupting the plans of the radicals. Everyone pick up a copy if you don't already have one. And if you do have one, please leave a review in all the relevant places so that we get it into the hands of all the people that need it. Rules for Retrogrades. Rise!
Welcome, parish orphans and retrogrades, to another exciting show. Today's topic will be traditional Catholic dating. Call it conservative Catholic dating. The issue keeps coming up. It comes up a lot with patrons. It comes up a lot on Twitter with people DMing me, and they used to DM Steph, formerly Ask Your Husband, who's with me today. What's up, Stephanie?
What's up?
How are you?
Very good.
You've been off of Twitter for a long time now because it's a generally very bad idea for the ladies to be on Twitter, especially Catholic Twitter. But your name was Ask Your Husband, and you are nearly complete with a book that you've been writing for Tan Books called Ask Your Husband. When can we expect that, do you assume?
I believe it's going to be out, I think, after your guys' feminism book, which you guys are going to be out in February, so I'm going to be shortly thereafter. It's going to be kind of like more of an approach to the ladies, and particularly for the ladies. Tim and Dave's book is definitely more like an academic approach to feminism and how there's no place for that in Christianity, especially Catholicism. My book is going to be, a nod to that, but more specific, to women and how to interpret that in their everyday lives as wives, mothers, girlfriends, and what have you.
Yeah, and so today, if we're responding to real world situations near and far about dating and the travails that seem to be arising under the peculiar set of circumstances of the right-wing Catholic, the traditional Catholic, the conservative Catholic, whatever you want to call them, retrogrades out there, guys and gals, there still are problems. And of course, utopia means no place, it doesn't exist. But a lot of traditional Catholics seem to assume that, and a lot of them assume this as they're single, that they've dialed up the formula for almost like utopian intersex relations, and that's just wrong, right? So it's wrong because some of the problems of dating and eventually marriage are human problems, man-woman problems that don't go away one size fits all. That's class A of problems. And class B of problems, I think that we'll be dealing with today, are problems that actually arise from the semi-trendy or trendy traditional Catholic approach to other problems, and they create problems on their own.
Yeah, there could be kind of an overreaction. I've noticed this show is really going to be geared to, I guess, kind of rein in everybody from all corners on dating, in particular traditional dating, because I think what happens in traditional circles is that we tend to overreact to the filth we're seeing in society, and we get really LARPy, and I know people always hear Tim say that word, and like, what does that mean? It's basically like being a poser. Like, it's basically like just seeing something in society and just overreacting to it in like a really corny way. So like you see like the smut going on in dating, and you're like, well, I'm not even gonna look at a girl when I'm on a date with her. I won't even make eye contact because that's improper.
Put a paper sack over it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to be like in like metal like armor suits, so we're not even like, just really silly. Obviously that's just an exaggeration, but it's the things in that light that we've noticed. A lot of other Catholics, they address dating and they try to be very, I'm very traditional, so I don't even think a man and woman should be ever in a room alone ever, even after marriage. That's how we're just like, guys, come on, this is overdoing it a bit.
But it's not, I like what you said. It's a LARPy sort of overcompensation or overreaction to a given problem. This is what we're calling category B issues that don't help, they hurt. Traditional Catholic, authentic dating. But they're not always overreactions in the sense of, I note that the porn problem in society, for example, is like a 9.5 or a 10 on a scale of 10. And so I'm going to go against it by thus and such in my dating life and my life with the ladies, if I'm a young man. It doesn't always mean, to say overreacting doesn't always mean that one is overestimating the degree of the problem. It might legitimately be porn, a 9.5 or a 10 problem in society, which I think it is. Or, overall sort of smuttiness, sluttiness, skankiness of men and women in society. That's a 9.5 or a 10 problem. So you and I are just kind of simplifying because our friends know that obviously we take that to be a 9.5 or a 10 problem.
Yeah.
But we're oversimplifying when we say that it's an overreaction. I think it's better to say it is a 9.5 on a scale of 10, just like some of these trads giving dating advice are saying. But their corrective, their medicinal means are simply straightforwardly not the right means of correcting that problem, right?
Yeah, I've noticed that. I think a lot of the the trads or whatever, we're very traditional as well. They have the right idea of what the problem is. The solutions get pretty nerdy, I think, and I think actually end up killing intimacy in young relationships. By that I mean there's like advice like, well, so what we'll do is we'll break down this dating show. I think we're gonna do what to do like on the first date, and then the relationship transitioning into you're officially dating, and then into you're about to propose. So I think that's the categories that we'll go with.
Yeah, I like that. But before we do that, I want to make a quick announcement. Not only will your book be out sometime in probably early spring, Ask Your Husband. Our book, which is still not officially named No Christian Feminism yet, we're toying with other ideas, should be out in February. More important than either of these for the month of January, anyway, is I will be starting another Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics class. It'll run on Tuesday nights. I'm still only halfway through the fall 2020 Nicomachean Ethics course. People loved it so much that they're telling their friends and family, and there's basically demand for a second course, which we will obviously start at the beginning, like Julie Andrews says. We'll start at the beginning, and it'll be a second course going on Tuesday nights rather than Thursday nights, starting in January, and it will run until early summer. So it won't be timed the same way that the other courses were timed alongside
a lot of people like missed
semester.
out like on signing up for Aristotle, and have heard since like, oh, it's great. So if you're interested in that class, a live class, I think, please just comment below that you're interested, just because we're trying to get an idea of whether we should start up a live class again with Tim teaching, or if we should, I guess, just sell like the recorded version if there's not that many people interested in the live version.
The former is better.
Yeah,
we just need a modicum amount.
Just let us know below. So that was a little public service announcement there.
Yeah, so again, we're going to start out item number 1, how to go about the first date, which is you're hearing a lot of terribly like cringe LARPy advice out there that just it makes me blush to even think about ever in a vacuum, in a hypothetical wonderland, even trying it. It makes me blush how nerdy it is.
Yeah, like the milady type stuff.
But again, we're not saying that it's not a response to a legitimate problem. And we're not even saying that the estimation of the size of the problem is outsized or anything like that. It's a legitimate problem. It's just a bad and wrong response to a legitimate problem. One more set of disclaimers, and then we'll go into the first date. Not being alone on the first date is growing in popularity amongst trads. But one more distinction. It's not just that this advice, this LARPy advice, that's kind of an overreaction or whatever, is wrong as it's applied, but it's right in principle. It's both wrong as applied and wrong in principle. It's wrong, as we're going to talk about in a second, to posit that the proper temperate approach to dating, man-woman dating, again, we're talking about consenting adults or near adults, we're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds, is the exercise of temperance, right? Which is refraining from a vicious pleasure in touch or taste. So when you start dating is the first time in your life that you will activate your temperance in the outside of the realm of food, where you're like, no, I'm going to go on the date. I'm going to be one-on-one with this girl, and this will afford the opportunity to mess around and to get into trouble. But this first, and I'm afraid to say burgeoning in popularity, bit of advice. Don't be alone on a date. It's terrible LARP advice.
It's
and it
awful.
doesn't afford the opportunity for temperance.
And also, like, can I just address, like, that just, again, it's just this weird, I think, I'll call it trad picture think, where it's like, oh, the more gallant and the more sophisticated traditional thing is to have a chaperone on a date. Imagine that. They did that in the 1800s. But it's like, but guys, I mean, that, it does not afford the sort of thing that should be happening on your date, which is you need to be getting to know each other. And it's too often that we're involving other people in our relationships too soon. And by that I'm saying even like adults that I'm seeing in a marriage, I'm seeing their parents are involved, giving them weird advice all the time. The whole point of marriage and dating is that it's about you two. And this whole don't be alone without a chaperone disaster, it's killing intimacy, and when you're actually starting to try to get to know each other. And also, guys, if you can't raise your kids to control their urges on a date where like, you have to be there actually physically watching them, then you have bigger fish to fry.
Okay, so these 2 points that you just raised right now conform really nicely to what I was saying about that this is wrong. The proposition that you shouldn't be alone on dates, first dates or otherwise. It's wrong in principle. It's not just a wrong because it's too high a standard in practice or something like that. That would, in a weird way, be a way of flattering the proposition. No, you're exactly right. One, it's wrong in principle, meaning corresponding to the nature of the thing, what dating or courtship is. It's wrong in principle because each date is a little microcosm of what life would be like, and you're supposed to be envisioning this, both of you, man and woman, as you date, as spouses to one another. And it's really LARPy to begin talking about marriage on the first date, because that's a nightmare. This is somebody that's very bad at dating that does this. But it is important to set the stage with due, proper marital independence at the beginning. And of course, that doesn't mean that you trust this person. You're literally just getting to know them for the first time. But what you just said, Steph, is really important as sort of step A as to why not being alone is wrong in principle. Because, just to reiterate, in principle, marriage is between a man and a woman and the sacrament, meaning God, the Holy Spirit, and no one else. And so many marriages are dependent on parents and friends and siblings with like regular marital counseling, which is necessary in crisis
don't know
marriages.
how to interact alone with each other, because they're always, a lot of these people unfortunately have used a third person as a linchpin on how to interact with their spouse. They've only, I guess, feel comfortable or something having like a mother around, you know, to help her like manage her husband or what have you. And it's like, you guys have to learn how to do that alone.
It's unhealthy.
If you're not, and that's our big thing, we probably should have started out with this. Do not start dating until you are mentally prepared to move into marriage. This is not playtime. This is the whole purpose of dating, is finding a husband or a wife. It's not for, you know, like, oh, let me just, this is fun. I like dating. I like going on dates. It's super duper fun. It's something to do. That's not at all the purpose. The purpose is to find, if you've chosen the married vocation, to find your spouse.
Yeah.
And if you're on a date with somebody and they're with you, and they want to bring their dad along or their mom along, it's like, how are you going to know this person intimately when there's a third person sitting in the room? The answer is you cannot.
Yes, it makes you look like you have Asperger's if you were to try that in practice. But that's not what renders it wrong. What renders it wrong is the principle that doesn't correspond with a solid holy matrimony involving a third human being, which you only do in crisis mode, and that hopefully will be very rare. You want to reach for that brass ring here. Go on the first date all alone and set the ground high. The second reason that Steph mentioned that it's wrong in principle is because, basically our opening salvo, what we began with, that it is a contradiction of the very real human ability to do virtue. This is the Puritans, particularly the Puritan Protestants, who disregarded and actually eschewed the possibility of human virtue. They thought, oh, you can't do it, we're totally depraved. These kinds of puritanical modes of thinking about the impossibility of virtue, that it requires some sort of superhuman to be temperate, have stolen into Catholicism.
Oh, it's such a problem.
Much Puritanism.
Protestant Puritanism stealing into Catholicism. I wish I could shout that from the mountaintops. A huge problem. That's honestly where a lot of this like nerdy LARP stuff comes from. Like it's infiltrating Catholicism.
Yeah, so it's all about Aristotelian ethics. Remember, Martin Luther is the one that said that Aristotle is this knave or villain, I forget what your word he uses, who ruined Christianity, who tarnished it with his ethics before it even got started. The joke is it's 3 centuries before Jesus that Aristotle lived. But the point is, Aristotle distinguishes between true virtue, when you do the right thing for the right reason under the right circumstances, like having temperance, virtue of, in this case, touch. You know, you're refraining from touch until sexual touch until marriage. It's only an accidental form of the virtue when you are doing the right act or refraining from the wrong act in an accidentally virtuous way, meaning you just simply disallow the conditions for the possibility of touch by bringing your grandpa with you to your first date.
And this is why we're also really big on not having a very long. And once you know that this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, it's actually against temperance to wait too long to get married and to have these really bizarre like 3-year engagements because you want to have like a big fancy wedding. That's just really bad advice because of the natural ability to want to be intimate with somebody. The longer you're pushing that off, the harder and harder it becomes and the temptation rises. Now obviously we're supposed to control those urges, but the reality of the situation is that if you're like prolonging, kicking down the can down the road for years and years and years and years, you're getting engaged and you're getting married in 4 years, it gets harder and harder to do. You still should do that, of course, but it's difficult. So that's why we're always saying, hey, once you find the person that you want to be with, you know, within the rules of the church, get married as soon as you can.
There's a second related point that I would call point number 2, which is bad advice comes from the secular world. It's dressed itself up in moral garb, dorky kind of prudish garb, and it's popularizing with the young people that I stay in touch with, which is many as a former teacher. The I want to be friends first exemption to dating. This could really just be sort of part 1C of our first rule, but let's call it rule 2. It's bad. It's really bad. It's a secular myth. It's a kind of lie about what the nature of dating is. Dating is sexual in nature. A man and one man asks one woman to a date. We'll talk about what that first date should look like, I think, with the next rule. But it's ultimately sexual. Now, you're not engaging in the marital act, the sexual act itself, because that is only appropriate when it's procreative and unitive in under the matrimonial formality. Blah, blah, blah. You all know this. So we're not going to be saying that it's sexually active in nature, but it is a dormant kind of sexual relationship in its nature, in principle, when you begin dating a girl. So this nonsense about that girls typically say it to guys, I've heard it a lot, I want to be friends first. And can we get to know each other as friends? That's a lie. That's nonsense.
What happens during dating, girls. Like, That's what dating is. Like, stop telling guys that. I think a lot of girls say that because they're wanting to appear like, hey, I'm not an easy ticket here. Like, you're going to have to win my affections. That's what dating is for. And I think that's the problem with our culture is that, unfortunately, what's happened because of the secular culture, we've turned dating into more of an official status than it is. And so now we have a pre-status to dating, which is this friends thing. No, dating is when that happens. Dating is when you're sitting across the table from somebody and being like, not only do I want to be this person's friend, but do I want to be this person's spouse? And I'm going to use this time to investigate this person to find out if I want to continue this relationship. If you're not even in the position, girls, to start that with a guy, with dating, then you just shouldn't be dating. Just don't be friends with guys. Just wait till you're ready to start dating.
Right. Yeah, there's an interesting point in there that we make that also surprises people, which is the following. That to be going steady, or whatever they called it in the 1950s, to have this set-aside status boyfriend-girlfriend what is your status? Are you single or are you married? That's the true dichotomy.
Right.
People say, oh, I'm not single, I have a girlfriend. No, you're single. You're single. See, that, again, is a double inflection in a funhouse mirror where it's actually the skanky culture that we live in going around parading itself as monogamous, which I guess in many cases it is. Boys and girls who call themselves boyfriends and girlfriends are being temporarily monogamous. They shouldn't even be sexually active at all. And so they start talking like they're not single. You are single until you're married. And this helps to clarify the approach of young people when you talk to them. You have all your options until the moment that you take your vows. And you ought to take your options really seriously. So it's only sleazy to date multiple people at a time if you're sexually active or anywhere near to being sexually active. If you're using dating the way Steph just described to find out whether or not this person is a friend plus, a friend who will become a matrimonial partner, then it's not sleazy at all to date multiple people at once, and it also doesn't reify falsely into a new category, the way the secular world does, what ought not to be a new category. Date, you're either single or you're married.
And plus, ain't nobody got time for that. It's like guys who are asking you on a date. If a man is asking you on a date and your answer is, I want to be friends first, just take yourself out of the dating pool until you're ready to start dating.
Right.
Because the answer when a guy asks you out for a date is either, yes, I would appreciate going on a date with you, or no, thank you, I would not like to go on a date with you. It's not like, how about this weird, creepy third ground where I waste a bunch of your time being your friend and then eventually give you my answer a month or two down the road. That's just disrespectful. Take yourself out of the dating pool until you're ready to officially enter it like an adult.
Right. And if it's just a cheap excuse for this guy's ugly or dorky and I don't want to date him, get more comfortable with confrontation and just say, oh, I appreciate it, I'm flattered, but
Men
I'm not
appreciate
interested.
a straight answer. Do not string guys along. If a guy comes up to you and says, may I you're attractive and I think you're very nice, may I take you on a date please? Your answer, if you don't want to go out with him, give him the respect just to say, no thank you, I'm really not interested. Right. That's
not let's be friends first and then hope he doesn't follow. How in the hell are you supposed to be friends when you can't go on a date? A date is just whatever activity you do when you join forces for an evening on Friday or Saturday evening and go do something. So theoretically, you're just surrogating friendship activity for dating activity, and it all becomes very meaningless. So that's rule number 2.
Rule number 3, I think, is just really what this is all boiling down to, is that it's a lack of direct communication going on in dating in general. And by that I mean what girls are saying to guys, kind of stringing them along with the whole friendship things, and then guys, just flat out ask a girl on a date. Just say, I cannot tell you how many girls I had talked to in my family, friends, what have you. I'm one of these girls that when I was on the dating, it used to drive me crazy when a guy didn't just say right out, I'd like to take you out on a date. That's manly. Girls respect that. It's putting it out there and it's showing confidence. This weird, texting them beforehand, kind of skirting around the issue. I can tell you right now, girls hate that stuff. Just the epitome of manliness is going up to a girl and saying, I'd like to take you out for dinner. Are you free? Very simple. Women appreciate it. It's direct and it's manly.
Yeah, and it's a yes or a no. And actually, girls, I think, preternaturally or supernaturally or I don't know what, naturally are attracted to that, but they have been conditioned by the culture to the point where I think a lot of guys might have heard you just say, oh, girls like that. And the guy might be thinking, no, I tried that. And the girl gave me the, well, I don't know, option C, let's go be friends first. Girls, by their nature, will appreciate that directness, honesty, forthrightness, blah, blah, blah. But the culture has changed it around where I've heard characterizations of such directness and forthrightness and manliness being interpreted as too aggressive or it makes you sound like a raper, which is nuts. Rapers don't go around and respectfully ask a girl, hey, you're beautiful. Could I go out on a date? Or more chill, just, hey, you want to go get a bite to eat? I'd love to take you out for dinner. That's what a date ought to be.
Date is not, can I just say this? Because I hate this. Coffee. Like the coffee. I'm sorry. Like if a guy asks me on a date for coffee, what that says to a girl basically is, I don't want to spend money on you on dinner. I'm only interested in like a $3 cup of coffee for you worth. But that is what that says. I get it sometimes, like when you're on a date, when you're dating a girl and you've gone on a lot of dates with like a young woman, and it's like, man, all these young men don't have a lot of money. Eventually, sometimes maybe you do have to start filtering coffee type dates in there because it's expensive. But for goodness sake, do not ask a girl on her first date to coffee. It's just, it's a red flag that like, oh, this guy is not that interested in me, or he'd ask me out to dinner.
Yeah, and it's weird because you get rom-coms that have sort of normalized it, and really, I'll stick up for the ladies on this one. Ladies, it's just guys saying, oh, well, it's nice because it's not fully committal. I think this comes from a Seinfeld episode. It's not fully committal. You know, it's much less time than sitting down for a full meal. What if I don't like this person? One, own it. Own your thrownness. You are in a position, unless you're married, you're in a position of uncertainty, of contingency. You have to go find someone you like, and you only know by jumping in the pool, at least insofar as you're on one date. By the way, coffee, if you do it the right way, it's going to take, 45 minutes anyway? Even if it's a horrible date and it's really bad, it's going to take you 45 minutes to find that out. Dinner's an hour, you know? I mean, it's very similar time. So, ladies, don't let guys get away with this. We're not giving the LARPy advice. This is, I guess, slightly more old-fashioned, but we're not LARPy old-fashioned because in some cases, you'll see, we're repudiating the LARPy thing, being old-fashioned for its own sake. But on this one, guys really should be stuck to, hey, if they think you're pretty enough, then, and they think you're cool enough or whatever, enough of a real prospect at marriage, everything that goes into that, then a meal is the cost of doing business.
Right, a meal is the cost of doing business. Really the theme I'm noticing between some of this more LARPy advice versus maybe what we're trying to go through here is like the LARPy advice tends to like kill intimacy, not being alone,
right,
going to coffee,
right,
you know, like let's be friends first. It's like stripping the intimacy out of dating, where the whole point of dating is intimacy in
That's
the
right.
proper sense, and cultivating that into marriage. Again, if you're not ready for that, take yourself out of the dating pool until you are. Don't waste people's time.
No, that's a really excellent point, and that's not on your show notes. That's what I meant when I opened up and I said you're not, obviously not permitted until you're actually married to engage in the marital act, the sexual act. But that intimacy that you just made in an excellent point, that's what I meant by you're not hiding from your sexuality. Like we're not intersex. We don't believe in gay marriage or bisexual, whatever. It is one man and one woman, right?
And one grandpa? No.
No,
one dad? No.
one old, octogenarian proctor from the
chaperone?
SAT you just took. If you ask out a pretty girl, you're taking the SAT. That proctor, who is at least 90 years old, is not welcome on your date and shouldn't be. It builds intimacy, which means a full owning of your sexuality, and you're just like, I am a man, this woman is beautiful and is very charismatic to me, let me go see if she would make a virtuous wife, and she's going to be sizing me up in an separate but equal way. Is she attracted to me? And the rules of attraction, the things that attract, are different for men and women. So I guess I'd like to kick this as rule number 4. It's important to understand for men what attracts women to men. And it's important for women to understand what attracts men to women. And the reason this is so important, because like we said about rule 1, there's virtually no difference between managing expectations about attraction of the opposite sex on date 1 or on a married date.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that is there, like Steph pointed out at the beginning. I thought it was really strong point. It's really unchanging from dating through marriage, and it's a different thing that attracts men to women and women to men in the primary sense.
Right. Yeah, I think, in general, I think it's just like women are attracted to, and we'll move this is what a girl likes about a man on a first date, and Tim will handle for the ladies what guys are looking for the ladies. Women on first dates want a guy who is confident, who is not too larpy. By that I mean he's not writing her poetry
He's
on
natural.
the first date.
Yeah.
He's natural. He's cool. Guys, I cannot tell you how important this is. Write it down, highlight it, what have you. Girls get turned off when a guy is, quote, too interested in her before she's even knows anything about him. It kills it. I know so many of my friends will write me or text me or whatever. They'll be on a date and they'll be on a second date with a guy and she's like, the guy's already like head over heels for me and is like making it completely clear. That is not cool. No girls like that. They want a guy who is cool under the collar, confident, can make out, some jokes. He's not too larpy or like doing any of these milady type stuff or, my famous example. I don't know if any of you have watched Frasier, but Frasier Crane. Do not be Frasier Crane on a date. Meaning this guy would like bring out like dozens of roses and this is like the first date. You don't want to overdo it. It makes you look desperate. Tim always says it this way. If you're like Ferrari and you're trying to Ferrari company and somebody's coming onto your lot to sell a Ferrari.
To buy a
Ferrari, sell a Ferrari. Who's in that position? To buy a Ferrari. Ferrari is not saying, if you buy our car, you also get this wonderful pot holder with it. They're just selling their car. Yeah. They don't need to go overboard.
That's for cheap cars, right? Cheap cars might say, oh, we'll toss in a toaster. I think this was the deal in the 70s. We'll toss in this oven mitt. If you buy our Yugo, that's for guys that are low on the market. And what I see a lot, and it comes from the culture of feminism, which seems to pervade everything in our culture. And that's what both our forthcoming books will be about, is guys will tell a girl so early, so often on the date, oh, I'm unworthy of you. And it's this beta, cucked, simping sense of chivalry, and it's fake. It's phony chivalry. These guys a lot of times are perverts at heart. Like, I'm so unworthy of you. You're like my muse, my goddess.
Guys
whatever.
think that girls want like the over complimentary stuff.
And what happens with the over complimentary? The girl starts to believe it. Yeah. I mean, literally, if I'm going to shop for a Ferrari and they're trying to tempt me too hard, they're like, oh, please buy a Ferrari. We'll give you this oven mitt. I'll give you the keys to my home. If he gives me used car salesman, I start believing him. And then it either offsets the relationship where the girl has way too much of the upper hand over the guy in terms of the power differential. And make no mistake, there is a power differential in all relationships, a proper power dynamism that needs to be in play. Or what happens is the girl just breaks it off and it's like, that guy looks, pusillanimous, impecunious. He looks like a weakling. And that is the guy is pissing away, if you'll pardon the metaphor, what is most attractive about men to women is confidence, power,
and just being chill, like not being super gushy or any of these other things. Like there's a funny Seinfeld part where like the bald kind of short guy George is always trying to get dates, and one of his techniques is to go near a really attractive woman and be kind of rude to her and kind of like give her the snub, and people are like, well, why would he do that? His whole point is like he's trying to make these women think, well, this guy's that unattractive, why is he treating me so poorly? He must have something going for him.
Right.
Keeping like the mystery alive. You could be the George, and you could just be like on a first date, like walking up to the milady's boudoir with like a violin, or you could just kind of play it cool and let the girl get to know you and see if she actually finds you.
Which is like a golden mean. It's don't actually insult the young lady, but I mean, just act like
normal.
Like, hey, I think you're a 10, and I don't want to act giddy. I want to act like I've been here before because I'm a 10 too. Nothing's more. That's what guys aren't understanding. Girls don't want to hear that they're a 10 and the guy is looking up to them from being a 3. Girls want to date a 10 themselves. You're ruining their experience, man.
Yeah. Girls don't want to date a guy who thinks that they're less than them. Girls want to date a guy who they like look up to. I've never, when I was dating, if a guy came on too strong immediately, or if he was like trying to like tell me, oh, you're so great, like thank you so much, like that type of stuff, I just like, ugh.
It's disgusting.
I don't want to date a guy like that. I want to date a guy I can depend on, who's strong, who's confident, who's not it honestly just reeks of wimpiness to be too effusive too soon. It's not even. Ask any girl and she'll tell you, like, if a guy starts like pouring on that sort of stuff immediately, it's a complete turn off. Nobody likes that, so stop it.
Because men aren't understanding what women are attracted to. It's not it's not so much the visual thing. Obviously, you should be as visually appealing and as hygienic as you can be, but that's our thing. So a guy thinks, oh, well, I can appear really weak and worshipful and lowly. As long as I'm decent looking or whatever and I'm not totally rude, I can be worshipful. No, that's their main thing they're appreciative of in men, attracted to in men. And you're ruining it. It's the irony of the chivalry is you're assessing it just from your male point of view. You're just like, okay, I look fine. My shirt's tucked in. I'm a handsome guy or whatever, and I'm going to go on this date, and she'll enjoy it, even though I'm ruining the main thing she's attracted to, which is not visual. Don't simp. The great Roosh, who we met in D.C., which is nothing anathema to Christian teaching, to quote him here, he's since converted. Some of his advice was not Christian. It was pre-Christian. But this is not. Kings don't simp. Don't simp. Act like Maximus. I like this girl a lot. I'm just going to sit here and be cool.
Guys who play it cool. Play it cool, guys. Please.
No poems.
So many relationships of my friends have been ruined because the guy just lays it on too thick at the beginning. So many. And a lot of these girls are like, he's a really nice guy. I can tell that he has good morals. He's really, nice. He's not like a dirtbag, but he's being really, like, he's like starting with the poetry.
Don't like me so much.
Like
How many girls have we heard? I'm talking people in their 30s,
it's a huge
friends
problem.
in their 20s, and we've had some older teenagers, ex-students tell us this. They're like, I like this guy. He's decent looking. He's a good guy. He's virtuous. I know that. He had some of the other things I'm looking for. And obviously he asked me on a date to dinner, which is cool because that's what I want. But then he literally starts ruining it. And the girl's literally like, please don't do this by liking me too much. Even if you like a girl a lot, young lads, just keep it to yourself, man. No one needs to hear about that, particularly on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth date. Just be cool. The main thing she's attracted to is cool, like Jules says in Pulp Fiction, whether or not everyone's watched that movie.
Take it easy. Yeah, that's what. Just take it easy, guys. Right out the gate, take it easy. How about for girls? Okay, so what is a guy looking for the ladies? For the ladies on the first date.
Everyone knows. This is not an exhaustive list. It's an illustrative list, meaning it's the main topic, the main member of the list. Confidence or power for girls. For guys, you already know. It's visual. So women, and there's a lot of, as simple of an answer as that is, there's a lot of nonsense going out around society that Christians, again, are buying from secular society about body positivity and everyone's equal. And men, I've even heard the argument, men shouldn't be more attracted to attractive girls than unattractive girls. Nonsense. So the main thing it's pure hilarity.
It's just...
You can't write this stuff. It's too bizarre. No. The main thing men are attracted to initially, just like the main thing women are attracted to initially.
What brings a guy to ask a girl on a date?
I should say what brings the guy to ask the girl on the date, just as the last section we said what brings the girl to say yes to the date. But they will each sustain their attraction only insofar as the desideratum in question, the sought quality, sustains. So it's not just superficial and it's a one and done thing. You have to be good looking as ladies to get asked out and then you can let yourself go while you're engaged or married. No. Guys should not only be confident leaders. Women want leaders. Women want to follow. You shouldn't only give that impression for the first 2 dates and then let down and be a little simping beta afterwards. No. But yeah, the reason it's worth saying here is because men are being told everywhere, oh yeah, I'm a gentleman. That's always a code word. If a girl says she likes gentlemen, it could just be she likes chivalry. I'm somewhat gentlemanly, I guess. You like that, right? But I mean, if that's the main list on...
A lot of girls use, a lot of feminists, like if I'm using that, if like a girl is pretty based and she's using that, like, oh, you're a gentleman, it means that you're like manly and you're taking your role as like a man well.
But she probably won't
women,
use it.
But a lot of women, yeah, I'm not really into that word. I don't really use that word that much. But like a lot of girls use that in a feministy way, when like, oh, you're such a gentleman, meaning you're simping. Meaning you're not
right.
You're being a wimp, basically.
Right. And
you're doing what she wants you to do and not what you should be doing.
Yeah, and some girls have been so twisted and convoluted even in their inner character by feminism that they are willing to forego what they're really attracted to, which is a powerful, confident man who restrained power, restrained confidence, not a cocky frat boy jerk, but a confident, powerful man who will lead them. They're willing to actually forego what they're most attracted to in order to take the reins of power, like Emperor Palpatine. Yeah. And I've seen this happen in a lot of guy-girl relationships.
And this is why we see so many miserable marriages, because women forgo that. Girls, let me just be honest with you. Girls like a guy who knows how to like say no to them. Honestly, like, no, I'm not going to do that. That shows strength and confidence. And if you're dating a guy that you are whatever, who's kind of wimpy and you're getting your way all the time, girls at first, I guess some get a kick out of that, but when they get married, this is where you get a lot of the women that are out there griping about their husbands. Oh, my husband never does this. Oh, my husband does that, because they married those guys that simp. Because they
get them everything they want
originally, and then
never tighten the purse strings. Never. This is fast forward 20 years. If this couple with the simping guy and the power hungry girl get married, what kind of married couple will they be? The girl has the purse strings. Well, right, the woman, she's never told, no, we're not, we don't need that stupid. For me and my household, sweetheart, we don't need like 400 throw pillows, even if you like to buy crap off of Amazon. No. And also, no, we don't need this. No. How often is that the guy should say that? It's the same principle with a rational adult agent as the woman.
Like, even in marriage is funny, because I saw those trendy like word things, like these framed things. Guys don't probably know what this is, but in like home decoration trend right now, there's this thing where it's just like words. It'd be like family, and it'll have like something like very plain print. It's kind of a modernist look. And I liked some of those things. And we went to the store and I was like, oh, I like that. And Tim's like, not in my house.
Like, what's wrong with you?
This is not happening.
And she's like, well, women like these. And I was like, this is for tacky, gauche people that don't know what art is. Sorry if people out there have. It says like love. I'm like, well, I know what love is. I'd rather get a beautiful painting or something.
So as devastated as I was, no, I'm joking. It was just funny. He was just like, I would never have something like that in my house.
What's wrong with you?
We're like laughing. I'm just dying in Hobby Lobby because we're having this conversation. But there's like 4 other women like in the aisle with me, like buying that stuff.
Yeah, being abstractly
like,
insulted.
With me, like, oh, I like it too. And Tim's like, I hate it. All guys hate that stuff. It's awful. It's just that, honestly, it's like, yeah, nobody likes to be told no or whatever, but there is an attractiveness to men who are able to do that, who are able to say, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm taking the reins here. This is not how it's gonna go down. There's women respect that in men who do that appropriately. Obviously, there's a way you can go overboard with that sort of thing. But guys, women like that. That's an attractive feature in a man, that he can say to a woman, like, I'm not going to go along with whatever you like. I'm the man. I'm going to put my foot down sometimes and say, no, I'm not going to be a part of this.
Well,
so
of course.
We got off the track with the girls.
We're talking about dating as preparatory for marriage. So it's hard to really, it doesn't actually square with the principle that, like, in terms of guarding the purse strings, it's hard to actually, aside from just being a George Costanza cheapskate, it's not really like a guy can overdo it too much. I mean, any kind of purse strings request is a request. And, a good man will,
I don't mean overdo it like he doesn't have, like, unlimited authority of the household. I just mean, like, you could do it either the way you did it, where it was kind of like a joke, where, like you're, like, saying, like, this is awful, I hate this type of stuff, like, making a funny joke out of it. Or you could just be, like, knocking over, like, a display aisle and storming out and throwing, there's ways emotionally that you can overdo that. But, obviously the authority to say, whatever.
That's tacky and gauche.
That's tacky and gauche. Is within the male scope of authority.
Do you guys know, seriously, how much good art, underappreciated art is out, even Christian art is out there that's underappreciated? If you're looking at a 2-foot by 18-inch stitched version of the word love in cursive, then just contact me. I'll direct you to some good art. I mean, that's not
big
art.
wooden like the family like that stuff.
Hope. It's like I know there's such a thing as hope. Like,
it's really in
give
right
me art.
now.
Do one that
Guys,
says art.
Trust me, it's in right now with the ladies. Every house you go to, it's like a big wooden like word somewhere in the house. I was going down that dark path.
You were, yeah. And I mean, like I suggested one that just says art. You know, like because it's all.
Man is the head of the household.
Right.
In cursive, would you allow that? Okay. Anyway, back to what.
So men, it's simple enough. Women, what men are attracted to you is visual appeal, and that's. It doesn't matter how many times you call it offensive, superficial, cavemanish, whatever. Dress nicely, dress appropriately, dress chastely, but dress as to accentuate what will attract, just as men should, no matter, okay, they're not Maximus Decimus Meridius, they're not the finest general of Rome, all of them, none of them. So they're playing up how they can play up their power and confidence with their other natural qualities. Women, same deal. I mean, you know how to accessorize and how to play. You're the fairer sex. You know
don't
how to play
have to
it
be like this is another big thing. Like I've noticed like within like women trad circles is that, and a lot of my friends are more like in my camp of things. You don't have to be in a gunny sack to show to impart the message that you're not a floozy or that you're not like. You're not part of the secular culture. Like, I think, again, it's going overboard. It's going overboard to be like, well, I don't wear makeup and I don't wear heels and I don't do this and I don't do that. It's like, okay, guys, or ladies, it's like, you can still look feminine and beautiful and pretty.
What
and
do
you
you
don't have
do?
to look slutty.
Yeah.
You can do it up in the ways that are appropriate to do it up in. You don't have to go overboard with, boring, like bland things to impart a message to a man that you're not going to be a floozy. I mean, it's like an intimacy killer. This picture think that I've noticed this Protestant puritanical infiltration into Catholicism, where I've noticed that it's like it's taking the spice out of life, and
Right.
it's in unnecessary ways. Where it's like there's no reason that a woman can't wear heels on a date.
Well, there's no reason a woman shouldn't wear heels on a date. No, I'm being serious. I mean, they don't have to be stiletto heels, but come on, it's an occasion. It's one of those occasions in life. If you're young and single, meaning unmarried, and you're looking to sweeten your prospects, men and women both want to do what they can to find a good match, and it is visual, but it's not immoral. That men are wired this way. God created us this way. It's the natural law. Yeah. It's good. It's ontologically good that men are this way.
And
it's
keep that
ontologically good that women are the way they are.
Keep that up in marriage. It's not the time when you're dating, you're trying to rein him in. Like, oh, look at me, I'm looking really cute today. Once you got him on the line, that isn't the time to just like cut it off and be like, all right, that's it. I'm just gonna let my hair down and just be in sweats every day. Some of the happiest marriages I've ever seen, that's one of the main advice that the women give, is that you got to keep up appearances. You have to keep looking nice and dressing nicely for your husband and really trying to gather his attention with how you're presenting yourself each day. Obviously, we all have like moments where we're like not feeling well or whatever. I'm not talking about every second. I'm talking about most times that you're doing those things. Most days.
Wouldn't you amend and say every happy marriage you've ever seen, that was a central precept? Right. I think that's
because it's understanding how men are wired and
nature.
Not apologizing for it and just being based about it and just being like, this is the truth, ladies. Body positivity is garbage. It's an intimacy killer. It's a marriage killer. Yes, your husband should look after your soul and love you for however you look like or whatever once you're married. But when you're dating, a guy has every right to be like, I'm sorry, I don't find you as attractive. Like, and I'm out of here. Like, he has a right to do that.
Well, no, and he has the right in marriage. We're going full on toward marriage, and we don't need to because it's just dating. But in marriage, a guy has a right to respectfully say, look, here's the thing. You could tell me right after I'm done what I need to tool up to be a more attractive spousal partner to you. But I'm just speaking for myself here. And, spoiler alert, it's going to have to do with the visual thing. everybody's had this talk. It's not only for lower sorts or untouchables. Everyone's like, you used to do this thing you like, you used to wear this thing you like, you used to kind of exercise every day. Like, can we go back to that? And hey, I know that I'm flesh and blood too, so I might have done something before you liked. I used to maybe be more confident or whatever it is, whatever these aphrodisiacs are. Let's play them both up. The point is, it's a thin blue line. It's thoroughgoing. It starts from the first date, and this is one of the ones, point 4 here, that ought to really be considered thoroughgoing, from the first date to natural death.
Okay, so we talked about like men. Number one, very very attracted to women, like physically. Everyone knows that, duh. Obviously, but I'm sick of people pretending that that's not real. It is, obviously. No, okay, so what about like even behavior wise? So we talked a lot about how men on dates, like what women are expecting from a man on a date in his behavior. What about for women? Like, what sort of things are guys expecting from girls, or not expecting from girls, that are happening right now?
Well, let's call this point 5 sort of conversational substance on a date, and more than just conversational. The things that you ought to be trying to find out about. Just call it substance. The substance that people are learning, not just on the first date, but on the second date. Some of it's specific to the first. Availability is what a man is looking for in a woman. It's not one of the things that necessarily piques his interest or attracts him, but it's one of the sort of conditions for the possibility of attraction, if that makes sense, is availability. Like when a man asks a girl out, it is one of the reasons that it's so disrespectful for a girl to say, well, I'm kind of busy, or I have a big friend group, or I just don't really trust you. I think you might be a rapist, so let's hang out as friends first, is because it means she's unavailable. Or a girl with big plans to go out, and it's like, well, I can only pencil you in 2 weeks. That kills intimacy from the perspective of the man, and it kills the condition for the possibility of building future intimacy. A girl should say, yeah, hey, I'm busy. If a guy asks you out for a Friday night and you like him and you're truly busy, which hopefully it should be your kind of main priority.
Right.
If
this
is your vocation. Yeah. If you're dating. So, but if you're truly busy on Friday night and you can't reschedule when a guy asks you out for, which is probably, if it's doable, then reschedule. Then just say, oh, I'm busy Friday night, but how about Saturday? The worst thing I've ever heard is when a girl says, oh, I'm busy then. And then the guy has to say, well, how about Saturday then? I'm busy then. How about Sunday?
All of her boring, dumb plans that she has on the side.
No, but
doesn't care. Just say, like, it doesn't need to be a big protracted conversation about like what friend you're going to be seeing when and what exam you have to turn and all that. Just be like, oh, if it's something you really can't get out of, just be like, yeah, you suggest
alternate dates. It smacks of a lot of feminism, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm busy. I'm doing this. I'm making career plans. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I've got a big friend group, that's kind of since the 1990s, 2000s, duplicating guy friend groups. That's the style points you're losing when you make yourself out to be unavailable or busy. But the practical points that are deleterious to fostering this new relationship are the guy, because girls are so non-confrontational about denying dates now, he literally thinks, unless you resuggest, I'm busy Friday, but I can do Saturday. If you do that, if you keep just saying, nope, busy then, he's just thinking that you're saying, no, I don't want to date you. I think you're ugly, dude. And it's putting him in a real quandary. Yeah. So that's for guys. Availability, it goes the lack of availability of the young female now, even ones that think they're conservative Catholics. Before we said a lot of Puritanism had stolen into items number 1 and 2. Yeah. Here with item number 5, the substance issues, the things you find out in conversation on the first and the second date. A lot of feminism has stolen into even the conservative Catholic world, where, again, girls just aren't available.
You out girls for a wife. He's not asking out a career woman. He shouldn't give a damn about what your dumb plans are about your job. He wants you as a wife. So if you're like sandbagging a guy who's asking you on a date with, oh, well, I have this, First off, the guy should probably take that as a hint, like, this is not wife material because this girl's got her head too far into feminism. But if she's a really great girl or whatever, maybe he'll put up with it, you know, for a little while. Like, okay, when can you go out? But if it even gets to the point where you're asking a young woman out and she's, like, sandbagging you with all of her, like, the minutia of her
big
her
plans.
schedule.
Big plans.
Just be like, next. You know, I can't... The main thing I think a lot of people might be thinking at this point is like, oh my gosh, there's so many like warning flags. There is. I'm sorry. There's feminism is just rotted our culture. Even like conservative women, Catholic women, I'm finding it everywhere in all these like varying alleys where I'm like, I'll hear these stories like, oh, I asked a girl out and she said that she wanted to be friends first. I'm like, bad. That's not good. That's not good. She's not ready to date then. That means she's still like immature. She's not a woman trying to get a husband. Take yourself out of the dating pool. If a guy asks you out on a date and you're like, oh, I'm too busy, you're not ready to date. Take yourself out of the dating pool. Let him find somebody who is ready to actually have an adult grown-up relationship.
The corresponding male condition for the possibility of failure is, I'll just say it instead of asking you because it's so obvious, is too much availability, which is, so see how it corresponds with the thing in number 4 that is deleterious to attraction. These are the things that make possible the failure of attraction. And for women, just as it's too little availability, which makes them active instead of passive and receptive, which is what women are supposed to be, what makes them attractive. Men, if they're the ones running down the date too much, if they're too available, if they're too passive, if they're the receptive one waiting for the conditions for the possibility of another date with a girl, then this is one of the main things that girls are looking for on dates as no-nos, right?
Yeah.
So too little availability on the part of the girl and too much availability on the part of the guy. You want to flip that.
Yeah.
Nature has it flipped. Men are active, women are passive. Men ask for the date and women accept the offer for the date. Men are, even physically, we don't have to go into the physical act. Men are the aggressors. Women are the ones that are the receptive principle.
A lot of this is just upholding like the natural attributes in which God has created man and woman, and you know that's I guess has gotten really offensive to people lately, but it's just the plain facts. Like it's just nature. It's just nature. It's how God created all of us. And obviously there can be like weird like exceptions to the rule, but writ large, this is how it works. This is how men are motivated. This is how women are motivated. And people like to get their hackles all up and like, oh, that kind of hurts my feelings. Like I'm a career woman. I'm going to school and stuff. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah,
it's like that's not what guys are like.
The truth.
Meeting a good guy is not interested in that.
It's true. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Men are active and aggressive. The truth doesn't care about your feelings, as has come to be a popular expression, and. So yeah, we understand that a lot of people that are probably good, in many ways, good, solid retrogrades that are out there agreeing with most of what we say are like, hey, well, I violated 2 or 3 or 5. It's like, okay, that's fine. I mean, no one's perfect, right? These are the rules, not the book of perfect sainthood of being a retrograde on the problem. And conversationally, the way this should shake out is the following: on your first, second date. And even once you begin dating more regularly and she comes over to your apartment to watch a football game after church on Sunday or something, it should be that the male's big plans for the world, the male's even hobbies, and I know girls aren't going to share all those, are the ones that come to characterize the relationship, right? Because the male is the active principle. So it's more natural. Of course, on a date, a guy's a bore if he's going to talk about his job or his career plans and not ask vice versa. But that's kind of complicated because, you know, women should be kind of using the degree. We call it the MRS degree at these good Catholic colleges that attract women there just to go meet good men.
That's what we're paying for with our 5 girls. If our girls want to go get a classical degree and get their MRS degree at one of these good schools, we will pay for that. If they want to run off and do like the, you know, boss babe stuff, not paying for that at all. Like you can learn that lesson the hard way and see how that life turns out, which I don't think they'll do. But it's like if they want us to pay for a good, we'll do the MRS degree
Sure.
payment.
But this should even extend to the hobbies, you know? I mean, like, it's interesting. I learned you're really good at cross stitch and crafts and things like that, but female hobbies don't tend to be the kind of thing that unify a family. We have a
But
family
that's so active. Like guys are like into sports and like combat and like physical competition. Like my hobbies are more like sewing, crafting,
and
it's
can
like
usually be done
individual,
alongside the male hobbies. So,
Right,
but I mean,
it's-
like, you can make a day of bringing the family along. If I go hunting, right? If it's nice weather outside and we're in beautiful Idaho, or even here duck hunting in Mississippi, or the male's basketball game. If you're playing at a adult league, whatever. I'm just pulling things
We
that
should mention
that
my
fall
hobby
close
of
to
like
home.
yelling through bullhorns. It's
Right.
not.
Right. Well, the bullhorn should be.
Our whole family revolves around that.
Yeah. So that's the point. What you're finding out conversationally on the date, point number 5, should correspond with what attracts in number 4 to respectively male and female, and availability and lack of availability correspond to that. Then you have point number 6, the end of, I guess this is only the first date. Finding out about a second date and the first kiss. There needs to be some sort of solidified universal rule for the end of this, which signifies if the date has gone well, that there will be a second date and that you like this person. And since
I loved it when guys asked me out on a second date on the first date. That's affirmation to a woman, like that it went well, and it's incredibly flattering. I don't know where it got into our culture to like, oh, I'm gonna call her in 4 days or whatever it was. That's lame. Just if you like a girl, the whole purpose is saying this is something you're going to be moving towards marriage. Just ask her out again on the first date if you liked her. If you're not, then don't ask her out again.
All the information is there, and it's instantaneous info processing. So you're like, this has been a great date. You already know. You don't have to go back and noodle with the math. Oh, this seemed great, but let me go check whether I'll ask her out on the second date. And same thing with the first kiss. It's all about signals, as George says to Jerry, and what should be expected, particularly to avoid the awkwardness, but also to express the appropriate first date intimacy that each of you are liking each other, and there should be another date. Is the guy should do the courtesy of, if he really had a good time, say, hey, I had a good time, when he's driving the girl up to her doorstep. Can we go out again soon? I got to check my schedule, but can we go out again soon? The girl's only appropriate answer, if she likes the guy, should be yes. And then they each ought to expect to have a peck or whatever. It's some sort of non-platonic intimacy.
So you're suggesting that people shouldn't have their first kiss on their wedding day?
Right.
I find that offensive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I am. I mean, this is what I mean. We're called to be in the world, not of the world. This is the way you do it. This is the way you do it, and it's not LARPy. It's realistic. It's true to Christian principle. It's building intimacy, the kind of marriage that will not involve anyone besides the two of you and the Holy Spirit and the sacrament. And you're setting the stage to have an independent relationship that's not dependent on a chaperone.
Grandpa.
If this thing does turn into marriage. Yeah, Grandpa.
String Grandpa on for a hot first date. Okay, so I guess we're going to transition into, you got the first date out of the way, the awkwardness is over, and you are officially dating. You're an official Catholic couple.
Yeah, we could go faster through this stuff, probably.
Yeah, we can go faster through this
Yeah, that's
stuff.
the detail that people
Because
are especially
a lot of,
confused
the
about.
Initial like impressions and things I think are in that first date. Like, don't be a nerd, don't simp for chicks. Girls look cute, and don't regale him with every boring detail about like your schedule. So the couple's officially dating. What's really important, I think, is actually, we get this email a lot from people. We're like, well, when do I start asking about like her plans, or if she's going to be, want to work, or, what she feels about like, the man being the head of the household, and that kind of weightier topics that wouldn't be necessarily on the first date. You're just trying to figure out, is this person like boring? Is this person like interesting to listen to? Like very basic things, and then you get into the more weightier topics. So like women working and men being the head of the household. Those are really important things you need to find out before you're getting engaged to somebody, obviously. When do you say that's appropriate to start talking about?
Well, we don't want to divorce it from all the kind of indicia that we're talking about on first, second, third dates. I wouldn't bring up things like that until you're a little more comfortable with one another, and it's more natural to let your hair down and to say, okay, let's talk turkey. Let's see if we can make a deal or no deal here. You don't want to begin that on the first, second, third, maybe even fourth date. But those indicia we just talked about, the first 5 points, which correspond with first, second date, they're all signaling the guy's kind of, I'm busy, I'm a man of the world, but I'm making time for you. I'm a winner, I'm a champ, I have lots of plans, and I'm powerful, confident, and I will be successful at what my endeavors are. That's what a guy's trying to signal non-verbally. That's why he's trying to look powerful, all that. The girl's trying to signal, I'm chaste, I'm attractive, and I'm available, and I'm interested in you. And then it's a couple of 10s that are each interested in each other. Everybody wins. That's the best situation. A 10 doesn't want a 1, a 1, whether it's male or female. So all of that nonverbal signaling should have been happening for the first few dates. Once you start letting your hair down and maybe you're becoming closer to steady dates where you've gone on 5 or 6 dates and you know there will be more, then you can be like, all right, well, so begins now the phase of the relationship where we talk about, we already had glancing blows. We're both conservative Catholics. We're both retrogrades. Good. But now let's talk about what we think that entails. Hopefully here we can kind of universalize what it entails. So if you say that, it means all this baked in stuff. But as of right now, there's a lot of confusion because a lot of women are out there calling themselves conservative Catholics and are thinking they're going to be feminist working babes. A lot of men think they're conservative Catholics, but they have a feminist streak in them as well. Or there's tons of different iterations of conservative Catholics that are actually not following the plan, the playbook. So yeah, around some time when you're comfortable, after you have in your first 4 or 5 dates, then let's talk brass tacks about what you think it means and what I think it means. Competing conceptions of being a conservative Catholic. And that's when it can get ugly.
And this is where a lot of guys, when they find out a girl that's very pleasant and, attractive or whatever, and the guy likes the girl quite a bit, this is where it can get kind of tricky, because if the girl's giving some answers that aren't on your list of prerequisites.
Right.
Hey, you're on a date and the woman's like, oh, well, I want to, I'm going to be like the CEO of a company, and I'm, spending a lot of, getting myself into like a lot of personal debt that the guy will end up taking on himself if they get married. And on top of that, that's going to draw against your finances, but also draw against your time as a couple if your wife's being farmed out to do all this work. If that isn't something that the young man is looking for, that's where it does start getting into tricky, because then a lot of these guys think, oh, okay, well, maybe that'll change. It rarely changes. Usually by the time a young woman is at the point in her life where she's already in school, all these things are firing on all cylinders, it's very hard to turn that around. I have seen it happen.
Possible.
It is possible, but those are called unicorns. Those girls are the unicorns in society, where they're like, yep, you know what? I was making all these plans to do all these things that kind of draw against my vocation as a wife and a mother. But now that I've met this young man, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to reevaluate my priorities, and I'm going to really settle into the vocation of being a wife and a mom. I've known those girls. They're super base. They're cool. And even some people actually after marriage that's happened to, where they've watched programs. They're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense, and they've stopped doing it.
So I think it's fair to say they're probably one notch less rare than unicorns, because we've known several.
Yeah, that's
true.
Yeah.
A unicorn Novus Ordo, for instance. We always talk about this. I've been to one in Steubenville in my whole life. Or I'd been to none up until a couple years ago. Unicorns, none or one of them you'll ever even meet. But this is more like, okay, it's a notch or notch and a half beneath. It's rare and it's serious trouble, right? It's a pink flag. It's red or pink flag.
It indicates all sorts of feminism. And a lot of girls, to their credit, don't know that because they've been infiltrated so badly by feminism. And a lot of them are really well-meaning, good girls, but they don't know how infected with feminism they are when they start talking about like going and doing, a lot of them like are doing jobs. They think, oh, I'm helping kids. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm doing these things. And they, on the surface, again, picture think, looks like you're serving the community and you're doing these really great things with your time. But then when they made a young Catholic man, he's like, as good as that might sound to you and as valuable as you think you are to society, let's look at these things under a microscope a little bit. Our family unit, which is should be more important to you, you're going to be drawn out of that and placed into another environment when your time should be really focused over here. And when young women hear that are cool, they're like, yeah, actually, that's true. You can't do two things perfectly. You have to pick one or the other.
Yeah, the reason women are drawn to these maternal jobs like nursing or teaching is because they have a strongly maternal nature.
Yeah.
The young man at this point in the date, whether let's call it date 6, here on point 6, this is when you're going to have to say, okay, well, I need you to want to do, or if it bless you, I need you. Here on date 6, the guy will say something like, I need you to want to do something maternal, so that's good, but I need you to want to do something that's maternal in the first sense, raising potential prospective future kids, and I need you to do it for $0 an hour, just, a roof over your head plus what I can provide. Room and board and the occasional gift, whereas if men and women who are dating get hooked on what Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat, called the double income trap, then all of a sudden you have a serious problem. You need, at some point, in order to be a legitimate, traditional, conservative Catholic, you need to make plans to be a single income household.
You need to make sacrifices.
And you have to do it. It'll entail sacrifices, but they'll be, like Steph said, there'll be unbridgeable sacrifices if you bring this up too late in the game. If she's got $200,000 worth of debt, student loans, what do you do?
This is why, again, dating and marrying early. Everybody made fun of Tim or whatever. People were all like, oh, you had kids when you were younger. First off, guys, how old was the Virgin Mother when she had Jesus? Just saying. And secondly, that's where this is how you avoid a lot of these problems. These stacking up student debt. People like getting too entrenched in their routines because they're like getting married when they're like 35 years old. If you're marrying and you're meeting at a younger age, you're growing up together and you're avoiding a lot of these problems.
Yeah, dependency on two incomes is killer. So it has to come up sometime reasonably early, whether it's date 6 or date 8. You got to talk about these things because in a lot of cases, it might kill an otherwise good deal. The men are usually going to have to bring this up with the women.
Okay, so moving on. So I know we mentioned earlier, like the first kiss. People I know, it's like a controversial thing, like a first kiss on a first date. Like, a lot of people have a problem with that. So let's just talk about what physical contact is okay during dating.
Because as you keep coming back to, Steph, all along, the goal is the appropriate intimacy being cultivated and maximally developed at every stage of the relationship, from the first date through death if you end up getting married. And physical contact is a huge part of that. But of course, the kicker that can get exaggerated by both the secular left and by members of our own religion is that this physical contact, when taken out of the appropriate context, can be immoral. So we want to try to set things to right there.
Right, exactly. And isn't there like I know it's really hard. Like we all talk about this, like even in marriage, it's very hard to like really chase down the church teaching on what exactly is allowed in those, and even in marriage. But like in dating, I think it's obviously a little bit easier to kind of say like, at what point does things start getting into, the threshold of sin? Is there anything that is a little bit more concrete or definitive as far as like, holding hands, that's innocent enough? But then when you start getting into more like physical contact, like kissing, hugging, and things like that, when is that appropriate? And like, at what point do we start getting into sin?
It's a bit like asking in Aquinas, at what point does drinking alcohol, consuming liquor, become sinful, right? And Thomas says, well, it's the point of wanton drunkenness when you're beside your senses. to some extent, this carries over in a slightly stricter way with physical contact, meaning there are lightweights, there are Irishmen who can handle a lot, and so drunkenness, its analogate would be, when one begins to lust. Now, there are certain acts you just can't do because you, by definition, can't do them without, physical arousal, sexual arousal. So obviously the biggies are all out, right up to the act of copulation. This is not a matter of subjective distinction.
Right. It's not just the sexual act that's off the table. There are things, if you are predisposed to being, going into things like lust, and you're experiencing those sorts of pathways into sin, you got to cut yourself off way earlier. Obviously, that's the number one obvious one. Like, you don't do that. But if you're even experiencing a certain amount of lust, if you're kissing your girlfriend, then you probably need to be backing yourself away from that as well.
Sure, but there's the effect of becoming de-stimulated with the increased frequency of this happening. So the good part is nature constructed us such that the more once you get a new girlfriend, you kiss her on the cheek and it might be really exciting. Probably should be. You get a kiss on the lips, which is, a thrill. It's not necessarily a illicitly sexual thrill, but it's, you're always knocking on the door. Well, the more this happens, the more your intimacy naturally increases from the point of the first date through the fifth date through, the 12th date, when you're not really considering yourself dating anymore. You just have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. At this point, there is a kind of destimulation effect where it just becomes more an outward sign of inward intimacy, to play on Augustine's language for the sacraments. Now it's kind of just intimacy. You give a peck on the lips, and it's not such a thing of intimacy. All you have to guard for is that on this upward ascent, where it requires more and more physical activity to constitute arousal, you have to stop wherever you would reach the point of absolute definitional arousal. So it's subjective, and people have to be careful here, obviously, but really this is what naturally impels the Christian, the Roman Catholic, man and woman, to cut this period of courtship as short as it can reasonably be. And the secular left makes fun of us on this basis, but there's really nothing to make fun of. It is a questionable period where there is an innate good human intimacy that's springing up between man and woman who are dating, who are basically aping marriage in their relations to one another. You can't ape it in all the ways. You can't do the marital act or get really anywhere close. So it's natural, though, to build the intimacy, and that's why you want to get right down to things as soon as you can, which is what historically and naturally and morally and philosophically keeps courtships short.
Right. Okay, so we'll move on to a thing that I think that a lot of young, good, chaste couples have a really hard time with. Okay, so what if things they're not going badly, but they're not going exactly well? Not what your expectation was. Do not be afraid to break up.
Yeah, that's point number 8.
It's really important that you do that, especially young men with young women. Let the girl go if you're not that into her, or you don't feel like she's a perfect fit for you. Let her while she's still young, and whatever, find the guy for her. It's very inconsiderate, some of these guys who are just like, oh, this girl's nice, but I don't want to hurt her by breaking up with her. If you just string her along for ages and ages and ages, and then eventually let her go, and by then she's a little older in years, and it's harder for her to find a young man. Let break up if you're not a perfect fit with one another, or if you have enough doubts that are rise to the occasion of, I don't know if I could be with this person for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, the epistemic part of dating, the knowledge you're trying to get from the person, knowledge of intimacy, how intimate could I get with this person, is not that deep. It's not that profound a level of knowledge. You can get it after, a few weeks, a couple months. And most people have it, and because of the forces of secularism that have pervaded Christianity and Christian thinking on dating, the pseudo status as a kind of terminus in itself of, well, we're a couple, which we talked about before, when we're not a married couple, but we're dating stably. That is a real danger to what we're talking about. It's a danger to the model of thinking about the amount of knowledge you need to marry someone. It's not that much knowledge. You should pretty much know or have a really good idea after a couple months, 3 months, what your fit is with that person. There's only a few questions you have to ask, and they're not the kinds of questions that can be answered on the third date. But you ask about moral and religious compatibility, and then just durability and longevity of the relationship. Some relationships are like, man, we really match up on paper, but I started realizing I just got way less excited about the relationship on the 5th date, even though it looked really good on paper. That happens. There's a phenomenological reality to that. And you should heed it. If you got bored on the 5th date, even though it looks great on paper, don't keep trying to resuscitate the dead body. Let it go. You don't have to let it go right then. Maybe give it a 6th or a 7th date. But that might be the stretch of a month's worth of dating. But don't be afraid to cut it off with someone after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. That's about the time it should take you to know.
Right. So then we move into the pre-proposal stage of the relationship.
Assuming you don't cut it off.
Assuming you don't cut it off.
This is point number 9.
And one of the things that I've noticed, we call this, I think in Tim's book, and I even mentioned it in mine, is the Daphne Moon, Pam Beasley switch and bait. And there are two, Daphne Moon and Pam Beasley are 2 female characters from 2 different sitcoms. One, Daphne Moon, is from Frasier. Pam Beasley is famously from The Office. And what you notice in their courtships in both shows is that each woman at the beginning of the series, when she's kind of in a relationship with a young man or getting to know a young man, they're very affectionate, very effeminate. They're
traditional.
They're not, and obviously some of them have secular issues going on, but in their personality and the way they present themselves, they're, affable and, really interested in the guy and all
submissive, naturally
all these things.
submissive.
The minute that the relationship in each case becomes comfortable or that they become engaged or married, they switch into these feminist nightmares where on screen, where they're bossing their husbands around, they're complaining about them on screen. They're falling into those traps, those feminist traps of just being miserable, naggy, just shrews. And so what we're saying here is that you don't want to, women, you don't want to be, when you're courting a young man, you don't want to be, super on your A game. And then the minute things become comfortable, then you start turning into a nightmare. And we've noticed that a lot. And it's even demonstrative on screen with a lot of sitcoms. The Daphne Moon, Pam Beasley bait and switch is what we call it.
Yeah, it comes from No Christian Feminism, from one of my chapters with my bro. And I think its insight, the Moon Beasley complex, is partly just we understand people try harder at the beginning. But that's not its key insight. Its key insight is it's an insight into the mind of a feminist. All of these NBC writers who worked on these 2 NBC shows are affirmative of feminism, which you see from the mature Pam Beasley and the mature Daphne Moon. They turn into outright feminist nightmares. But even these feminists, this is the shocking part, saw fit to write in the pre-courtship flirtation and early courtship phases of Moon and Beasley, really, really traditional roles for women. And this tells you something, that romance, which is just the name of sexual intimacy, romance requires traditionalism, the traditional Christian view of sexual roles. And the leftists, because they want to write a good show, they're kind of writers first and feminist leftists second. They'll try to fit it in once the dating becomes boring. or ordinary or either pre-engaged or engaged. But the point is, they wanted to sell Jim and Pam's courtship on The Office as the main glue, the main thing attracting you to watching The Office in the first 4 seasons of the show. And so what do they recur to? They don't portray a feminist chick trying to date a guy where she's nasty to him and rude and yelling at him bossing him around equal. No, she is the receptionist. He is the salesman. He literally she's there to take his calls, to take his messages, to print out paper to get him messages, get him coffee. And there's a subservience to Pam that the writers in The Office ended up really apologizing for throughout the latter half of the seasons of the show, where that's what's romantic, right? Is this girl that's it's unclear whether or not she has a college degree. Jim's a salesman. He mocks his own job, but he's got a college degree. He's actually got a salary position, not a wage position at this Dunder Mifflin. And, then of course there's the block of, Pam is engaged, but she's traditionally very feminine and he's very masculine. Same thing with Daphne Moon from a slightly older NBC show, Frasier. She is pretty much a housekeeper. She's Frasier's housekeeper, and his brother Niles. Niles and Frasier, 2 brothers, are very well-to-do. They each have PhDs and MDs, and they're Ivy League pedigree. And this is just a British housekeeper that came to America and has no formal education. And she's very respectful of Niles, and it's a beautiful. It's tainted by divorces on either end and all that.
Yeah, there's lots of that secular kind of nastiness running through the shows. But
Sure.
In general, the writers know what, at the beginning of each courtship, men are attracted to. And they write these females in a traditionalist bent where they're, responding to the male in a way that's entirely different than at the end of the shows.
Receptive, available, submissive, and it's really very beautiful. Once each of those relationships go on, Niles and Daphne and Jim and Pam, they sour, they ferment in a bad way almost as soon as they become solidified, definitely once they get engaged, and each woman turns into a frowning nightmare. Literally, Pam and Daphne are frowning in 3/4 of their scene in every season of either respective show once they're married.
And they're bossing their husbands around. They're complaining about them. They're each one. They go from being kind of like a housekeeper and a receptionist. At the end of the series, they're each
medical
all about
professional.
Their careers, and it's just.
And
it's
Pam
lame.
even gets elevated to salesman.
Yeah, it's obvious that what men are attracted to, which is why romances are written in a way they are.
Even by feminists.
They start off in a very traditionalistic bent, and then they eventually have to infuse the feminism and nonsense in there. We're asking in this section for females to be particularly mindful of that. Obviously, it's hard to keep up your A game throughout 30 years of marriage, but really try to remember what you were doing at the beginning of your courtship, and then continue that into your dating, continue it into your early marriage and late marriage. Just your behaviors, how you respond to your husband or your boyfriend. Keep that up. Don't let yourself just fall into a rut and start turning into the Pam Beesly and the Daphne Moons in the later seasons.
The feminists want to keep early romance romantic because everyone's drawn to it. And then they want to keep mature, much more meaningful romance, which takes a little more work. They want to de-romanticize it because their ultimate goal is the destruction of marriage and the family, right? But they still want to make their hay. They want to make their bucks selling early romantic sex, which is what they do, and therefore they recur to this one model of traditional Christian man-woman relations. What Steph's saying about the fact that the writers are doing this, it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy to sell this unromantic version of mature romance, of marriage really, because it's a natural pitfall in the human heart to be less excited about something that's no longer new. But here's the kicker, and this is why we're talking to really anyone. This is why it's dating advice for even people that have been married longer than us. Marriage is a constant renewal of keeping the fire burning, or whatever you want to call it. going back, even talking about your early dating days is exciting, is thrilling. And going back and doing what you can to renew the flame. And it's very doable if the lines of communication are open.
Yeah, do that a lot. Like I've noticed, like in our marriage, when we go back and we really just talk about like the funny stories and the reminiscing of our early courtship, dating, and all of that, we end up like, it brings us closer. I mean, just remembering those times, and also it just kind of puts you back in that mind frame of like, oh, I remember when we were doing this and we were having fun and things were new and fresh, and it kind of kicks you out of like whatever rut and schedule and, you know, the everyday life that you're in at the time, and it brings you back to those times and helps you kind of like increase the romance a little bit. We try to do that a lot, just kind of remembering and talking and reminiscing about that, and it actually really does help. It's simple, but it works, and I imagine it would help people even in a dating sense too. Just remember, like, yeah, when I was first dating, like this guy, I was always like bringing him like little treats or snacks or like little things and dressing up. It's like, I remember, I want to be like that. I remember when our courtship was new and fun. I want to bring some of that back into a relationship.
Yeah, just remember this truism. Last point. Mature marital romance is much deeper, and it's a much hotter fire. It's just more invisible and hard to see at first. No, it really is. But once you see it, you're like, wow, I'm much closer with you, Steph, than we were when we were first dating. Though the intimacy when we were first dating felt so intense. It was partly illusory, partly anticipatory of what was to come. But the point is, it's deeper later. You just have to try a little harder to tap into it.
Right. Exactly. So moving on, we'll just say this is one that I wrote down because I've noticed this way, way, way more in traditional circles and not necessarily at all in the secular culture, because unfortunately, secular culture a lot of girls are not very close to their dads because they're just leaving them, you know, divorcing their moms and going off. But in traditional circles, a lot of women are very fortunate and lucky and privileged to have very nice dads. But I think what happens is that when these young girls who are very close to their dads, and they start marrying a young man, or when they start dating a young man, they're asking their boyfriends to simp for their dads. And so by that, what do we mean by simp? So is there a simple explanation for simp?
Obsequity, to being obsequious and falsely sweet and falsely kissing up.
Yeah, just basically kissing the dad's ass. Now there's a proper manly way of a young man respecting the girlfriend's father, and there's this simping nonsense that I've noticed in traditional circles where it's like the father is like the kingly lord who's even kind of too weirdly involved in his grown adult daughter's relationship, and the woman is expecting the young man to kiss her father's ass at all times. This is disastrous for relationships. This isn't affording the young man the opportunity to be the head of his own unit and to take the woman out of her parents' home and start their own family. It's weirdly involving a father in places that are just not appropriate at that stage of her life.
Yeah.
It's fine for a dad to be interested in his daughter's relationship. Normal. Like that's fine.
Healthy.
All fathers want their daughters to have healthy, normal relationships. If you're a father who wants that for your daughter, know when to take yourself out. If you see your daughter is like trying to get her boyfriend to emulate the things that you're doing, or like, oh, did you hear what my dad said? Oh my gosh, like involving the dad too much, as a good Catholic father, you should say to your daughter, listen, I understand that we have a very close relationship and I want the best for you as my daughter to have a nice, wonderful marriage. But to do that, you need to have intimacy with a young man and get to know him without me being involved so much. You guys are a unit on your own, and I don't need to be nitpicking or involved this much.
Or really at all, aside from, yes, a good father will want to have the knowledge, not necessarily involvement, just knowledge. This is a good relationship. If it's not, there's not a ton you can directly do aside from advice and counsel. A father's involvement is really just epistemic. Again, he should be concerned with knowing for his own well-being and the well-being of his daughter that it's a good relationship. If it's not, he can't directly do too much about it, right? Because if the daughter is convinced this is her vocation and he's convinced it's not, you're not allowed, even by the dictates of the church, to interfere with the vocation. You can advise and try to point her toward areas where the guy might not be good for her. But more than anything, to go back a second, the exception proves the rule. And here's what I mean. Do you want to submit yourself to a father-in-law that might be telling you to contracept or encouraging you to let the woman follow her dream of working, or, you know, that you shouldn't have kids until you're both 35? Of course not. And so what a lot of traditionalists will fall into the pitfall of thinking is, well, no, but this dad or that dad is traditionalist and he would never advise that. That's not the way that contingent life unfolds. No one knows what their future father-in-law is going to be like until probably right before they get engaged. You don't really meet the parents too early on in many situations of dating today. My point is, the rule, the exception proves the rule, because you can't know with 100% certainty that you have a wise father-in-law. It doesn't matter whether he's Catholic or Protestant. Most Catholic or Protestant father-in-laws of the baby boomer generation advise using contraception. Even if you could know it, he's not the authority. It's not his involvement. Asking the father things about your relationship, starting with whether or not you have permission to get married, is kind of like asking your neighbor whether you have permission to decorate your own house. That's between you and the wife, or the future wife, not between him.
And it's funny too, because a lot of times you get these kind of like Protestant-y questions from these dads. Like when you're meeting like a young woman's dad, you'll get questions like, how are you going to provide for my daughter? With the presumption that she's also going to be providing for herself, because the dad's encouraging her to work. So as good as you're, okay, so let's say you have a great future father-in-law, super traditional Catholic, a lot of this nonsense isn't happening. Even then, you guys are a unit. There's this really weird strain in Catholicism that I've noticed lately, where the father has become like this third portion of a couple's relationship. It is completely inappropriate. Yeah. It's not at all considerate to the young couple.
And it's not traditional.
It's not traditional.
It was never a thing.
It's Protestantism to have that sort of like the dad is the kingly lord over like an adult woman's relationship with a young man. If you are a father, you need to want your daughter to marry a guy who isn't going to put up with that. You want your daughter to have a man, to marry a man, or to date a man who's his own person, has his own real sense of what he wants his family to be, and who's a leader and who's confident in the job that he's going to do for your young daughter. And it doesn't need you peeking in, overseeing every little thing that they're doing.
Yeah. It's the way we never were, to borrow Christopher Lash's term. That never was a thing, and it's LARPy, fabricative imaginations now in the LARP mind, imagining that that's the way it once was, that a relationship is really three human beings, woman, man, and woman's father, and it's a soggy sandwich. It doesn't hold up to even the definition of what the Catholic vocation of matrimony is. It involves two people and, of course, God, but it's a really bad idea and it doesn't work out, and men need to be the leaders, the man involved in the relationship, not the father. The father's the leader of his own relationship with the girl's mother. He's not the leader of the relationship between man and his daughter, the woman.
He can advise his daughter, I think this young man is good, this young man is bad. That's definitely in the purview of the father's right. But he does not have the authority to say no, to enforce anything. Yeah. When she's an adult, sorry guys, that's the truth.
Which is why it's dumb to ask permission. It's
that's
like
our
asking,
next point, yeah.
Yeah, next point, don't ask permission to get married. If you're scrupulous about it, then you can buy him a beer as you tell him, hey, we're getting married. But it's tantamount. At the force of law, it's like asking permission from your neighbor to decorate your own house. Then all of a sudden your neighbor begins to assume, where he wouldn't have assumed before, that he has a right to tell you, no, don't put up Christmas lights this year. It's bizarre. It's perverse. It presupposes that he has the right to interfere in your vocation. You might tell him respectfully over a beer, or you might not. It's not really my style.
We told together again, we've said this before on our other shows together about this not asking the dad's permission. And again, I know we're in the minority on this issue because everybody looks at that system and they're like, that seems very traditional and respectful of the father. Again, guys, I want you to re-look at this whole situation, the scope of things, and say, but the purpose of marriage is not seeking anyone's permission except for the woman's. It's you two are a unit. You leave and cleave. There is a reason why it's structured that way, because relationships are intimate. Marriage relationships are supposed to be intimate with the couple. And yes, you have your family and everybody on the periphery who's, visiting and those things, but they're not supposed to be having a huge influence on what you're deciding together in your vocation together. And the other thing too is, so you go to your future father-in-law, and you ask permission. What if he says no? Yeah. It's not a real question. You're not actually asking. Don't be a phony. It's not a real question. You're not actually sitting down and asking his permission to do it. Because let's be honest. If the guy's like, no, I don't want you marrying my daughter, and you've decided that I'm marrying her anyway, rocks, man. Don't be
By the way,
phony about
I guess you're not going to see your grandkids, which, your daughter will be providing grandkids in about 9 months. And you might not be invited to have a relationship with them, right? So he's not in the position of strength. If it comes down to will to power might makes right, it's really, you have the actionability and the enforceability of like, okay, if you're going to throw a fit, then I suppose you're not going to know your grandkids. So we don't want that. So don't tempt that situation. Just tell the parents-in-law, the majority of whom, Catholic or Protestant, will give, I think, I'm afraid to say, really bad advice now.
Right. Boomerish type advice.
Don't create the opportunity where they think that they're in charge. That's really important.
We have 5 daughters, and so people always, when we give this advice, people always come up to Tim and they're like, come on, Tim. You wouldn't be upset like if a young man like didn't ask your permission to marry your daughter. And what we always say, I'll let Tim answer for himself, but for me, it's like, that is a good sign. If a young man and my daughter appear before me and they're like, we have decided together that we have going to enter into the vocation of marriage together. Mom and Dad, we want to let you know. I'm going to look at that young man and be like, wow, that's an alpha male. That's an alpha male right there. And that's what I want my daughter dating. Of course, I want him to be respectful. I don't want him to be brutish or any of that other stuff. But because he doesn't ask my husband's permission to marry my daughter does not mean he's some chauvinist jerk. It just means that they are close enough to decide together as a couple what they're going to do, and then they're going to inform us, the parents, and we will either be happy or thrilled or whatever the situation will be. But when people say that to you, like, Tim, how would you feel when if you put all this blood, sweat, and tears into raising your daughters, and now all of a sudden a young man didn't ask your permission?
I mean, it could be turned around maybe, but I would think that this is probably a beta we're dealing with. I want my daughters, any of them who go to holy matrimony, I want them all to have moral alphas, the best a man can get, like Gillette used to say. I want moral alphas, and let me just say this. I am extremely, extremely close with all of my daughters, with the 3 who are coming anywhere near to marrying age, still quite a ways off. But the 3 ones of age, I'm extremely close with. And that involves trust. I know that I've got a million flaws. But one of them has not been a delinquency of fathering. Mm-hmm. They're good. They're going to make wise decisions. And I'm going to have to continue to tune up as they enter teenagehood. But they're in a good situation, and the more you trust them, they'll bring home someone quality. So at that point, the main concern is I'd rather have an alpha than a beta.
Right, exactly. Thank you. And that's one of our daughters down there screaming right now. One of the younger sorts of daughters. Okay, so let's move on. Now people are going to be like all over the comment section about that, but I stick by it. Don't ask permission. It's phony. You're not even really asking permission. You're basically just putting on a stupid dog and pony show to show the dad that you're a gentleman. And there's way better ways that are authentic to do that. Just be a good alpha mate for the guy's daughter, and he'll get the picture that you're a good dude. You don't need to do all this weird simping and asking fake permission and all that nonsense. And if you're a good Catholic dad out there, you really shouldn't be expecting that, honestly. You want your daughter to be marrying an alpha, and alphas don't ask permission to enter into a vocation that God himself called him into. It's just stop doing that. Okay, so Patreon. We asked our patrons or Tim's patrons, if they had questions about dating. And so we're going to now address some of those questions that they have, that they've emailed us and asked us to address.
Christian Reagan asks, what discussions specifically should be discussed before a proposal? I understand religious, ethical worldviews, financial, how to raise children, and marital intimacy issues. Is there anything else? Thank you. I mean, I think you covered the biggies, but it's the most important expression or communication of the truths that need to be unified between the two parties on these issues you mentioned are lifestyle. And the way that a lot of conservatives now, again, I'm beating something of a dying horse, but a lot of conservative young women now say, I'm conservative, I hate feminists, I'm a traditional Catholic, and then they're making plans for careers. I think this is the biggest one, the most prominent one, where they might talk a good talk about being a conservative Catholic, but they don't walk a good walk because they're getting a college degree for any other reason besides the knowledge itself, which is why it's good for young women to study philosophy and theology. They have the knowledge itself and they can impart it to their kids. Or the MRS degree, just to meet a man. That's enough. Even if they're not really interested in the college, go to one of the faithful Catholic colleges to get a good young man, hopefully an alpha. But the point is, it's more like they talk a good talk. You want to see that they walk a good walk on these issues. And that's why dating takes longer than just 2 months, because you can start having these talks after you've been dating about a month, and you can get the talks over with over the course of the next couple dates. You can talk about these pretty lengthy issues over the next month, and then be like, well, I know what you are. The reason you date a little longer at least than 2 months, doesn't have to be much longer, before getting married, is because you want to see that they walk the talk.
And also, I'd add just a little a side note there too. You also want to know how they argue and how you can get out of arguments. And sometimes 2 months obviously is not. You don't usually have like your good first argument in that time frame. The reason I mention that is because the way people argue and the way that they get out of arguments is vital for marriage, because it just cripples your marriage if you're the type of person that cannot have a difficult conversation, come back to the table and really just figure things out and work together for a shared goal. If you shut down, you leave, you're like out of there, and you're not a productive arguer, that actually matters quite a bit. And it affects how you're going to be relating to each other for the rest of your lives, because let's face it, arguments happen. Okay, so the next question is Benjamin, and he's asking our thoughts on online dating services. He says he has a friend or two that met a spouse this way, but they seem a little technological and artificial.
The answer is yes, they do. I never used one. Steph never used one. I've had a couple friends that met spouses that way too. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they seem like the technologicality and the artificiality shine through. Other times people seem to have kind of lucked into them working. It depends how far along you are in looking the natural way. Try them. Yeah, give them a try. Nothing can hurt.
I know a lot of people who are a little bit older and they try those services and they actually end up cutting out a lot of the fluff, so to speak. They can kind of really hone in on somebody who's, ready themselves to get married really quickly, and, you can figure out, what their ideals are and all that. So I think that they're, from what I've heard from other people, they've actually been pretty effective in some of the older age groups. He has another one. He's asking, does dating advice change on tiers of ages?
Of course it does. Exigency, urgency increases. So if you're not having good luck the natural way, try the technological way, or vice versa.
How would you navigate long-distance relationships, especially in terms of a timeline? My girlfriend and I have been dating for 2 months, but I'm feeling like I'll be approaching the crunch time in the next 2 to 3 months. It's scary to think advancing a relationship with someone who I've only seen in person every 2 or 3 weekends.
Yeah, I generally don't advise being in long-distance relationships. There's very infrequently a good ground for them, because you met the person face to face and presumably had enough time to become intimate, a couple months at least. I don't know your situation, Elliot. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. This isn't absolute. It's just prudential. Generally, if someone's going to be moving away after 2 to 3 months of dating, you have enough information that you need in this exigent circumstance to make a decision about them. Especially if it's an elective move, you probably either shouldn't move if you require a couple more months to know, or if it's still worth moving and you do have enough information, it's probably the best way to know that you don't want to get married to this person. Like I said, I believe it only takes 2 to 3 months to know that this is the right person for you. If you have the luxury of 3 to 5 more months just to see that they walk the talk, take it. But it is a little fishy, suspicious to me when people get in long-term relationships because they knew the person at the beginning face to face. Why would you allow the relationship to slip into that status? Generally avoid them. In your situation, think about it real hard.
Okay, next question, I guess, pertains to a father's involvement into a young couple's relationship. They're asking at what age is it appropriate for the father to kind of interject himself? At what age does it stop being appropriate, I guess, is the
Well, the old manuals, I believe, said don't let any of your children date until they're ready to cultivate love, falling in love, which, again, Catholics are surprised that this sounds like the natural law wisdom that you'd find in a romance movie. Yeah, don't let them date until they're ready to be falling in love, which is, namely, the pursuit of the marital vocation, and you don't have the right to stand in the way. So if this means you don't let them date until they're 18, then don't let them date till they're 18. If they start dating someone when they're 16, that's why it's a little more touch and go, a little younger. Then they'll still live in the household. They haven't attained their majority. And so you might feel more impelled to stand in the way if it's a bad relationship. So if you're the type of person that struggles with prudential judgment calls, you want all things Kantian in black and white, then I guess don't let them date till later. I'm not the kind of person that avoids or is averse to prudential judgment calls, so 16, 17 probably is the appropriate time to date. But it's never really appropriate to disrupt two people's love when they're two Catholics, especially, who figure that this is their vocation. It's never appropriate. Don't let them date that early.
Right.
So all in all, it's roughly a dozen points with some questions about how to date in a way that cultivates the intimacy appropriate for a proper proposal. And that is merely the entree for a proper married relationship. The real goal and the real pitfall to avoid is thinking that intimacy should be avoided at the beginning and that it happens naturally at the end. I guess it's a double pitfall.
Yeah.
You don't have to avoid it at the beginning. You just have to avoid fornicating or getting anywhere close. But you should be cultivating intimacy at the beginning. A lot of trads don't understand that. And then once you're married, it has to be one of the foremost goals of every living day between you and your spouse to foster that intimacy, which is real. It's just invisible. And this is why, they make the jokes. Marital couples get all into role playing and the funny business, because it's absolutely important. It's a crucial part of your vocation. The church refers to it itself, the act of copulation, as the marital act. And it is. It is the essential act of your marriage. And your day should really hinge around it. And so there's two pitfalls there. Intimacy doesn't come automatically. You got to work really hard. You got to say, hey, do you like what I'm wearing? Would you prefer me to work out more? Man and women should both say this. Whatever it takes. And the other pitfalls at the beginning. You should be crafting intimacy right from the very beginning. Intimacy at the beginning just constitutes inside jokes and really seeing eye to eye and really having this intense inchoate attraction to somebody that you plan on building on. That's it. Little Christian boys and girls out there, you got to be looking hard. If you don't feel called to the religious life, you got to be looking really hard. And I think these tips will help you. Please do like this, subscribe, hit the bell, or else neither of the former two do any good. Please do see to my Patreon. We've been getting a lot of interesting interaction that I'm supposing exists with YouTube, because they admitted that their algorithms are weird. and they dinked with them, and we've been noticing it's kind of been difficult on Twitter,
They'll
YouTube.
freeze your views for like 2 hours. It's really been crazy.
So help is duly appreciated, and
if you like this advice here too, again, we're going to re-mention that Tim reopened up his Aristotle class. So that'll be starting, I think, January 19th in 2021. And
go to timothyjgordon.com.
You can buy the class there. And again, there's nobody who gives better advice than Aristotle. So.
And our books will have similar approaches to a unified view of dating, engagement, and the long haul marriage. In Steph's book, Ask Your Husband, and in my book, which is a working title even though it's completed, No Christian Feminism, which is due out in February. Steph's will be due out a couple months after that. God bless you all. Deus Volt.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit